The toast lasted 43 seconds. Tessa counted. Not because she was nervous, because she needed something to count. Something mathematical, fixed, and indifferent. While her sister's voice floated across the chandelier-lit ballroom like smoke, wrapping itself around the necks of 300 guests and pulling. Some women are just built to be aunts, not wives. Naomi raised her champagne glass higher, her smile enormous and diamond bright. You will always have a place at my table, Tessa. We love you anyway. The laughter that followed wasn't mean. That was the worst part. It was sympathetic. The kind of laughter that says we've all thought that about you, honey. But she was the brave one who said it out loud. Tessa's face did not move. Not one muscle. She had learned that skill young, learned to build a wall behind her eyes so fast that people who threw things at her saw nothing but glass. She was about to set the champagne flute down. Walk to the coat check. Go home. To her blueprints and her silence, and her absolute refusal to cry in a rented gown. That's when the mahogany doors opened. He walked through the center of it. Yoongi Chul didn't stride. He didn't loom. He moved through the crowd the way a cold front moves, not announcing itself, simply arriving, and changing the temperature of everything it touched. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. His posture was so controlled it looked like architecture. He didn't look at the bride. He didn't look at the groom. He crossed the entire length of the ballroom, 300 people parting like water, stopped in front of Tessa, and held up one small thing between two fingers. An emerald earring. Her emerald earring. The one she'd lost 3 weeks ago. Gichul reached forward, slow, deliberate, giving her every opportunity to step back, and with 2 fingers, hooked it gently onto her left ear. His knuckles barely grazed her jaw, a touch lighter than breath. Then he spoke, quiet enough that only she could hear. Dangsane makyaga gidarigo isumida. Your carriage is waiting. From somewhere behind her, Naomi's voice cut through the silence. J1. A note in it Tessa had never heard before. Not anger. Fear. Tessa looked once at her sister. At the expression on J1's face. All color drained, staring at Gichul the way a man stares at something he knows can end him. Then she looked back at the man in front of her, whose face had not changed, who was simply waiting. Tessa set her champagne flute on the nearest table. Then we shouldn't keep it waiting, she said. She walked out of her sister's wedding with Yoongi Chul's hand at the small of her back and the sound of 300 people holding their breath behind them. 3 weeks earlier, Tessa had stood at the head of a government conference table and spent 4 hours dismantling every argument the Young Industries legal team had assembled against her. Zoning appeal. The building in question was the Haidong Annex, a 1920s administrative structure in the Jongno district, 4 stories of pale stone and arched windows that a development consortium wanted to raise for a mixed-use tower. She had spent 11 months preparing her counter-appeal. 11 months of archival research, of learning Korean construction law well enough to argue it with native speakers, of building a case so meticulous that every potential objection had a pre-assembled answer backed by 3 sources and a precedent. The Heritage Preservation Act, she said in Korean, that was fluent and deliberately formal. Section 14, subsection 3, provides standing to any licensed architectural consultant engaged by a recognized preservation nonprofit, which I am, on behalf of the Seoul Living Architecture Foundation, as filed with this board on March 7th. She slid a single sheet to the board chair without breaking eye contact with the lead attorney. The structural deterioration report your client submitted was conducted by an engineering firm that shares 3 board members with the development consortium. I have filed a conflict of interest complaint, which under Article 19 triggers an automatic hold on any board decision. That hold went into effect this morning at 9 a.m. The lead attorney opened his mouth. I'm not finished. Not loud, not sharp, just final. Heritage restoration projects generate 23% higher long-term tax revenue and 40% more sustained foot traffic than new construction towers. If you'd like to argue economic benefit, I am prepared to do that for as long as you need. Silence. In the back row of observer seats, Guichul sat perfectly still. He had not expected to come to this meeting personally. He had sent his lawyers because it was routine. A minor permit appeal, easily resolved. He had intended to stay 20 minutes. He had been here for 4 hours, and somewhere in the third hour, while she was methodically dismantling the structural report with a specificity that implied she had personally inspected every load-bearing wall of that building, something shifted in him, something cold and armored and long-settled, and cracked, just barely, at the seam. He was not a man who admired things. He assessed them. He catalogued value and risk and utility. What he felt watching Tessa take apart a room full of lawyers with nothing but preparation and refusal, that was not assessment. He told his driver to find out her name before she reached the street. Naomi followed them into the hotel lobby, train gathered in one fist, jaw set. "What is this?" she demanded. "Tessa, who is this person?" Guichul didn't raise his voice. He addressed Naomi with the particular brand of courtesy that is indistinguishable from dismissal. "Ms. Attawale's time is not something I intend to see wasted further this evening. Thank you for the invitation." "She's my sister, not—" "I know who she is," said quietly. Said with such absolute certainty that it landed in the space between them like something physical. Naomi's composure cracked, just at the edges. And in that crack, Tessa saw not outrage, but calculation. Her sister looked at Guichul the way people look at things they are trying to figure out how to use. But it was Jaewon's face that told the real story. He had gone the color of unglazed ceramic, eyes fixed on Guichul with the specific terror of a man who has been pretending, successfully, for a long time, and is watching the pretense collapse. Tessa filed this away. Then she matched her pace to Guichul's and walked out into the Seoul night. The penthouse smelled like cedar and cold air and something underneath. Something old and mineral, like the inside of a vault. Tessa stood at the window. Below, the sprawling Seoul skyline, 47 floors down. She had been watching the city for 5 minutes. She needed the 5 minutes. Not because she was afraid, because she was. Beneath the surface calm she'd maintained since the toast. Furious. She turned. "You blew my cover." He looked up from his drink. Set it down. "I've kept my professional life entirely separate from my family for years," she said. "My sister now knows that someone in your tier of the city has a connection to me. You walked into that room and made me visible." He crossed the kitchen and came to stand at the opposite end of the window. He didn't crowd her. "I walked into that room," he said, "because your brother-in-law has been running a coordinated campaign to identify the anonymous designer behind the Haidong bid. He hired a research firm 3 days ago. They had your name as of this afternoon." The champagne glass in Tessa's hand didn't move, but something inside her went completely still. "How do you know that?" "Because the research firm he hired reports to a holding company that I control. They contacted me at 7 o'clock tonight with your full name and the project details. I was already in the car when I redirected to the hotel." He hadn't come to make a grand gesture. He'd come because he was already moving on a threat she hadn't known existed. "Why?" she asked. There was something in his expression she hadn't seen in the conference room. Something stripped of performance. Direct in a way that was almost startling. "Because what you did in that room 3 weeks ago was the most significant piece of professional work I have witnessed in this city in a very long time. And the building you are trying to save is worth saving." He paused. "And you were the only person in that ballroom who didn't deserve what was being done to you." She didn't trust it. Not yet. But she filed it. "Tell me what Jaewon is actually doing. All of it." He told her. The Park family had spent a decade constructing a reputation for old money they did not have. The estate, the corporate interests, the Seoul social calendar, all of it financed by debt. The primary creditor for approximately 67% of that debt was, at its root, Guy Schul's syndicate. If Tessa won the Haidong bid, it invalidated a deal the Parks were counting on to stabilize their position, so Jae-won intended to get her blacklisted. He was going to try, Guy Schul said. Precise emphasis on the past tense. She noticed that. What do you want from me? She asked. What's the exchange? Something flickered across his face, the smallest possible version of appreciation. I have a problem inside my syndicate. Someone is feeding information to an external party. 3 suspects. All 3 will be present at a charity gala in 6 weeks. I need someone beside me who is not connected to my world, someone intelligent enough to observe what I cannot observe myself, because every person in that room is performing for me. You want me to be your fiancé for 6 weeks. In exchange, I give you everything I have on Jae-won Park, documented, legally airtight, and the infrastructure to ensure your bid proceeds without interference. She stared at him for a long time. He waited. He was apparently prepared to wait indefinitely. Tessa looked at his hand, extended slightly toward her, not reaching, not demanding. An offer. Formal and precise. She reached out, shook it. 6 weeks, she said. I want everything on Jae-won in writing before this week ends. By Wednesday. She nodded, turned toward the hallway, then stopped. Tried the door. It didn't open. She turned back slowly. He was watching her. His expression had not changed. The door, she said. It's locked. One single beat where something moved in his eyes. A flash of something uncharacteristically unguarded. She watched him recalibrate. Watched a man who controlled every room he entered suddenly and visibly lose his footing. Not because the door was locked, but because of the look on her face. Because he had just asked a woman, who had spent years building walls to protect herself from the people who were supposed to love her, to trust him. And the first thing she'd discovered in his home was a locked door. The override code is 7741, he said. You can leave at any time. The code works from any door in this unit. Completely still. Completely readable for the first time. She looked at the door. At him. At the door. She did not enter the code. When you came to that board meeting and watched me work, she said, before you knew any of this, what were you actually thinking? He looked at her for a long, held moment. And then, barely, just at the corners, something shifted in his face. Something that had been kept behind glass for a very long time. That I had never seen anyone fight for something beautiful the way you fight, he said. And that I did not know what to do with that. She pressed her palm flat against the door. Didn't enter the code. Stood there for a moment with the coolness of steel on her palm and thought about her grandmother's earring. What it had meant that he'd found it. Kept it. Returned it with that specific tenderness in a room full of strangers. She turned back. 6 weeks is a long time to share a space with someone. Yes. There will be rules. I work every morning, 6 to 10. That time is mine. I will have the East study cleared for you by Monday. Outside Seoul did its indifferent, glittering thing. Something was beginning. Not dramatically. Not with violins. Quietly. The way structural things begin. The way a foundation shifts. Deep underground. Before the surface shows any sign at all. She crossed the room. Sat on the leather sofa. Pulled her knees up. Tucked her feet beneath her in the expensive gown. Tell me everything about the gala. Start from the beginning. He sat. And for the first time all evening, Yoon Gi-chul did not look like a man bracing for an attack. The door, 7741, stayed locked. Not because she couldn't open it, because she chose not to. By the third day, a pattern had emerged that neither of them had negotiated and neither remarked upon. She worked until 10. He reappeared at noon. They ate lunch with documents open on both sides of the table, and the silence between them had become a comfortable thing rather than an armed one. It was the silence that scared her most. He asked questions about her restoration process that were not the questions civilians asked. Not what does it look like when it's done, but why did they choose this stone here, and what does it mean when a building hides its best structural work where no one sees it? One afternoon, sitting on the floor of the East Study with a cross-section drawing spread across her knees, explaining why the Haidong Annex's arched windows were load-bearing in a way the original engineers had disguised as purely decorative, she looked up and found him sitting with his back against the wall, jacket off, watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Open. That was the word. "You look at buildings the way I look at balance sheets," he said. "Like they're telling you something they don't tell anyone else." "Don't they?" "Yes, but balance sheets lie to me sometimes. Buildings never lied to you, did they?" It wasn't a question. She didn't treat it like one. "Never," she said. "Stone doesn't perform. It just holds, or it doesn't." He looked at her like she had handed him something he didn't know he was waiting for. On the 5th day, he walked her through an intelligence profile of one of his 3 gala suspects the way he walked his lieutenants through briefs. Full information, full complexity, full trust in her ability to process it. When she identified a behavioral tell his entire team had missed, a specific, recurring pattern indicating deception, he went very still. Then picked up his phone, called someone, hung up. "You would have made a terrifying intelligence analyst. I restore buildings for a living. Every one of them is a crime scene if you know how to read it." He laughed. Not a polished social laugh. A real one. Short and rough, and clearly surprised out of him. She filed that away too. The gala was in 9 days when Gichul canceled the scheduled fitting with the designer and informed Tessa he would take her measurements himself. "You know how to measure for a bespoke gown." "My mother ran a textile business. I grew up in the workroom." She turned to face the mirror. He was professional about it. His movements efficient, practiced, completely technical. Until his hand settled at her waist and the measuring tape drew taut, and she could feel the warmth of him at her back. Not touching, but present in the way heat is present. In the way the air pressure changes before a storm. She looked at their reflection. He looked up. Found her looking at him in the mirror. Neither of them moved. Tessa, her own name, said, like that. Quiet, private, careful. Did something she was not prepared for. "Don't," she said. Soft. Not cold. Honest. "Not yet. Not before this is finished. I need to think clearly for 9 more days." His hands dropped from her waist slowly. "I'm not asking anything." "That's the problem. You never ask. You just stand there and exist, and I have to do all the work of deciding what it means." The corner of his mouth moved, the very edge of something that wasn't quite a smile. "What does it mean?" She raised one eyebrow. "Write down the measurements, Gichul." He wrote them down, but he was almost smiling when he did it, and she looked away before he could see what it did to her face. The gown arrived 4 days later. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. She understood power in rooms differently now. Standing beside Gichul at the gala, she felt it viscerally. The way the room reorganized itself around his presence. The way eyes tracked him and then slid to her, reassessing. She was wearing both emerald earrings. He had produced the second one that morning without comment, set it on her drafting table, and she had looked at it for a long time before she put it on. In the second hour, she found what she was looking for. The tell was small. A suspect named Im Dae-soo, the most polished of the 3, who had a habit, when truly off balance, of touching his left cufflink. She watched him do it twice in rapid succession during a conversation with a contact she recognized from Gichul's briefs. She touched Gichul's arm twice, their prearranged signal, and felt him go completely still. They reached the edge of the room near the tall windows. "Im Dae-soo. Im Dae-soo," she confirmed. "Are you certain?" 72%. "You want more. I need 20 minutes. His lip curved. "Take the 20 minutes. She took 17. By then, the ambush had arrived. Naomi appeared at her elbow, champagne in hand, wearing a controlled expression that covered a great deal of ground. Jaewon materialized at his wife's shoulder, impeccably dressed, looking like a man who hadn't slept. "I hope you understand what you're doing," Naomi said carefully. "Being seen with someone like Jungi Chul has consequences for a professional reputation." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Tessa said. "I've always known. You just never paid close enough attention to notice." Then Jae-won stepped forward and dropped his voice. "Your bid on the Haidong project? I've had conversations with board members. There are concerns about the consultant's credentials. Foreign designer, no registered Korean firm. It's a vulnerability. I'd hate to see your work get derailed over a technicality." The threat was wrapped in so much courtesy it was almost elegant. And then, Gi-chul was there. She hadn't seen him approach. He was simply beside her. Not in front of her, not shielding her, but beside her. His shoulder aligned with hers, present the way load-bearing walls are present. Quiet, absolute, not going anywhere. He was holding a leather folder. "Mr. Park," he said, "I think we should discuss the technical elements of your family's financial position." Jaewon went the color of old paper. Gi-chul opened the folder without ceremony, hands clasped behind his back, voice flat and precise as a weather report. "The Park family consolidated debt stands at approximately 4.2 billion won. The primary creditor on 67% of that debt is an entity called Cheonggak Capital Partners. Cheonggak's beneficial owner is me." He turned a page. "This morning I completed a legal transfer. The Cheonggak debt, all of it, has been moved into personal ownership. Specifically, into the name of Tessa Adewale, who is, as of 9 a.m. today, the sole creditor for the entirety of your family's financial obligations, including the deed to your primary residence." The silence that followed had weight. Naomi was looking at Tessa. Not with calculation this time, with genuine shock. The kind that comes when the story you thought you were living turns out to have been a completely different story all along. Gi-chul closed the folder, stepped back deliberately, and gave Tessa the floor. This is not his moment. He has made it hers. "I'm not going to call it in," Tessa said. "I'm not going to take your house." She watched something move across Naomi's face. Relief, and something more complicated underneath. "I'm going to restructure the debt into a payment plan your household can actually manage. I'm going to get you out of the hole he put you in." She took a breath. "But I need you to understand something. I have been protecting my career from this family, from you specifically, for 4 years. Not because I was ashamed, because I watched you take every success I had and shrink it, or share it without permission. So I hid." Her voice was even. Completely even. "I'm done hiding. My name goes on the Haedong project. My firm gets registered. And the next time you stand at a microphone and decide what I'm built for, remember that I was holding your mortgage before you finished the sentence." Naomi stared at her. Then, slowly, effortfully, she nodded. Jaewon looked at Gi-chul. "The Imdaesu situation, was that handled?" Gi-chul said, "before we came in here." They left. Tessa stood in the antechamber with 4 years of careful silence lifting off her like architecture finding its load path, like stone, finally, holding. The day the construction crew arrived at the Haidong Annex, Tessa was already on site at 6 a.m. She walked the building the way she always walked a new project. Slowly, hand on the walls, listening. She was on the 3rd floor checking the arched window condition when she heard the roof access door open. She knew his step by now. Recognized it the way you recognize a sound that has become part of the daily architecture of your life. She went up. For a moment they were quiet in the way they had learned to be quiet together. Not absence, not avoidance, but the specific comfortable silence of two people who no longer need to fill the space between them to feel safe. You're not supposed to be on the construction site without a hard hat, she said. I know. I have a spare. I don't want the spare. She almost smiled. Seoul moved below them. Towers and temples, and the thin bright line of the Han River catching the morning light. I resigned from the syndicate this morning, he said. She turned her head. The operational structure has been dissolved, the legitimate holdings stay, but the leverage operations, the shadow work. He was quiet for a moment. It was built to give me control. My father's design. A son who could never be threatened because he held the threat on everyone else. I was very good at it. But it turns out there are things you cannot hold at the same time as other things. Gichul. She said his name the way he had said hers, quiet, specific, belonging only to this moment. I didn't ask you to do any of that. I know. I don't need you to dismantle your life to stand next to mine. I know that too. I didn't do it for need. A pause. I did it because I looked at what I'd built and I looked at you. At what you build. At how you build it. At the reason you do it. And my work looked like a locked door compared to yours. He stopped. And she watched something happen that she had not yet seen from him. Not in 6 weeks of study. Not in the zoning room or the ballroom or the amber-lit silences of the East study. Yoongi Chul went uncertain. Not afraid. Not calculating. Just uncertain. A man standing at the edge of something he cannot pre-assess, and then he lowered himself to one knee on the bare stone of the Haidong rooftop. Nothing in his hands. No ring. Just the complete posture of a man who has stripped every defense he has ever built and is offering only himself. I am not good at this, he said. I have been very good at control and very bad at wanting things I can't manage the outcome of. You are the only thing I have ever encountered that I could not manage the outcome of, and I find that I do not want to. The light moved. She felt the building under her feet. Tessa Attawale, who fights for beautiful things, who counts seconds instead of flinching, who left the door locked not because she was trapped, but because she chose to stay. His eyes on hers, open, all the way open. Stay. She crouched down in front of him, eye level, the way she approached every structure she loved, not from above, not from distance, but close, where you could see how it was actually built. She put her hand on his face. He went very still. Eyes closed for just a second, the way a man goes still when he's been given something he thought was permanently beyond him. You know what I've learned about load-bearing structures? She said. He opened his eyes. The ones that last aren't the ones that look strongest from the outside. They're the ones that were built to hold weight in both directions. They give as much as they bear. She leaned forward, closed the last 3 inches between them. The kiss was not a beginning, it was a recognition. The thing you feel when you put your hand on a wall that has been standing for 100 years and understand in your whole body that it was built to hold. Warm and certain and longer than either of them had planned for. When she pulled back, she was still holding his face, and the soul light was still burning, and below them a construction crew was carefully, piece by piece, restoring a building that everyone else had been willing to let fall. She stood, extended her hand. He took it, and rose. They stood together on the stone of the Haidong Annex, the building she was making whole and the man she was learning, with soul stretching in every direction like an answer to a question she'd stopped being afraid to ask. For the record, she said against his shoulder, the answer is yes. He turned his head. I didn't ask a question. I know, she said. You never do, I told you. I do all the work. And Yoongi Chul, who had not laughed easily in longer than he could remember, laughed. Quietly. Completely. And the building held. If Tessa made you feel something, if you watched her hold that champagne glass and knew, just knew, she was built for more than anyone in that room was willing to see, then you already understand what this channel is about. Stories where the woman who gets underestimated is always, always the most dangerous person in the room. Subscribe, the bell. You know the rest. And I'll see you in the next one.